The sun hung low over the quiet streets of Boise, Idaho, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Cloverdale Estates. It was a Thursday afternoon in June 2025, the kind of day where the air smelled of freshly cut grass and the hum of air conditioners filled the gaps between birdsong. In this suburban enclave, where every house looked like a variation of the same blueprint, 2 stories, beige siding, and a 2-car garage, life moved at a predictable rhythm. Neighbors waved politely, kids rode bikes in lazy circles, and the occasional dog walker broke the monotony. But beneath the surface of this idyllic neighborhood, something was stirring, something that would unravel the fragile trust binding Cloverdale together. Marcus Reed sat at his desk in the upstairs office of his modest home on Aspen Drive. At 34, Marcus was the kind of man who blended into the background. He wasn't unfriendly, but he kept to himself, a habit born from years of working remotely as a software developer. His days were spent coding, debugging, and sipping black coffee from a chipped mug that read, "Code hard, love soft." His house was tidy, his lawn mowed on schedule, and his interactions with neighbors limited to brief nods or the occasional, "Nice weather, huh?" He liked it that way. Attention, he'd learned, often brought complications. But today, complications found him anyway. Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes after a grueling morning of troubleshooting a client's buggy app. His laptop screen glowed with lines of code, but his focus was slipping. The internet had been acting up all week, video calls pixelating, Spotify buffering mid-song, and downloads crawling at dial-up speeds. At first, he chalked it up to his provider, ClearNet, having a bad week. Boise wasn't exactly a tech hub, and outages weren't uncommon. But something nagged at him, a faint itch in the back of his mind that this wasn't just a network hiccup. He opened his browser and logged into his router's admin panel, a habit from his days as a network security enthusiast in college. The ATM interface loaded slowly, and Marcus frowned as he scanned the list of connected devices. His phone, his laptop, his smart TV, all accounted for. But there, at the bottom of the list, was something else. BoiseNet X12. The name was odd, not the usual string of random numbers and letters you'd expect from a default device ID. It looked deliberate, like someone had named it with intent. Marcus leaned closer, his brow furrowing. He lived alone. He didn't share his Wi-Fi password with anyone, not even the neighbor kid who'd once asked to borrow it for a school project. So who the hell was BoiseNet X12? He clicked on the device's details, but the information was sparse, just an IP address and a connection timestamp that showed it had been active for days, maybe weeks. His jaw tightened. Someone was piggybacking on his network, and they weren't just streaming Netflix. The data usage was high, too high for casual browsing. Whoever this was, they were doing something heavy. Annoyed, Marcus decided to take action. He kicked the unknown device off the network with a single click, then reset his Wi-Fi password to something stronger, a random 20-character string of letters, numbers, and symbols. To ensure the change went through smoothly, he stepped outside to his driveway, where the router signal was strongest. The summer heat pressed against his skin as he stood near his parked Honda Civic, typing the new credentials into his phone. His fingers moved quickly, his focus locked on the screen. Across the street, Karen Mitchell stood at her kitchen window, a glass of iced tea sweating in her hand. At 52, Karen was the self-appointed guardian of Cloverdale Estates. She wasn't part of the HOA, that was too formal for her taste, but she had a knack for noticing things. A car parked too long in front of someone's house, a delivery, truck making too many stops, a neighbor who didn't wave back with enough enthusiasm. To Karen, these were signs, little cracks in the neighborhood's perfect facade that needed addressing, and Marcus Reed, he was one giant crack. Karen had never trusted him. He was too quiet, too detached. He didn't come to the annual block party, Didn't chat at the mailbox, didn't even put up Christmas lights last December. What kind of person didn't put up Christmas lights? And now, here he was, standing in his driveway, hunched over his phone like he was plotting something. His fingers danced across the screen with a kind of intensity that set her nerves on edge. She didn't know what he was doing, but it looked suspicious. Hacking, maybe, or spying. She'd read about people using phones to intercept Wi-Fi signals or worse. Her cousin's friend in Pocatello had her identity stolen that way, or so she'd heard. Karen's grip tightened on her glass. She didn't have proof, not exactly, but she had a feeling. And in Cloverdale Estates, feelings were enough. Before she could second-guess herself, she grabbed her phone from the counter and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. Hi, yes, I need to report something suspicious, Karen said, her voice low but urgent. My neighbor, he's outside right now, doing something with his phone. I don't know what it is, but it looks off, like he's up to something. Ma'am, can you describe what he's doing? The dispatcher asked. Karen peered out the window again. Marcus was still there, standing in the same spot, his face lit by the glow of his phone. He's just tapping away like he's hacking into something. He's been out there for a while, and it's not normal. Can you send someone to check it out? The dispatcher asked a few more questions. Marcus's name, his address, whether he'd done anything threatening. Karen didn't have much to offer beyond her gut instinct. I just know something's not right, she kept saying. He's always so secretive. Please just send someone. The call ended and Karen set her phone down, her heart racing. She'd done her part. The police would handle it. She took a sip of her iced tea, but it tasted bitter now, her nerves jangling with anticipation. Marcus, oblivious to the drama unfolding across the street, finished updating his Wi-Fi password and pocketed his phone. He glanced around the neighborhood, noticing the quiet street and the distant sound of a lawnmower. Everything seemed normal. He turned to head back inside, ready to test his internet speed and get back to work. Then he heard the sirens. At first, they were faint, just a wail in the distance. Marcus barely registered them, assuming they were headed somewhere else. A car accident on Fairview Avenue, maybe, or a medical call a few blocks over. But the sound grew louder, closer, until a police cruiser rounded the corner and slowed to a stop right in front of his house. Marcus froze, his hand still on the doorknob. What the hell? Two officers stepped out of the cruiser. The first, a tall woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, wore a badge that read Detective S. Thompson. Her partner, a younger man with a wiry frame and quick eyes, was Officer J. Patel. Marcus's stomach sank as they approached, their boots clicking on the pavement. He'd dealt with cops before, routine traffic stops, nothing serious, but something about their purposeful strides told him this wasn't routine. Sir, Detective Thompson called out, her voice steady but firm. We received a call about suspicious activity at this address. Mind telling us what you're doing out here? Marcus blinked, his mind racing to catch up. Suspicious activity. He was in his own driveway. I'm changing my Wi-Fi password, he said, the words sounding absurd even to him. My internet's been slow and I found an unknown device on my network, so I reset it. Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. Patel's hand rested near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to make a point. You live here? Thompson asked. Marcus almost laughed. His car was in the driveway, his name on the mailbox, his life rooted in this house for the past 4 years. Yeah, he said, crossing his arms. I've lived here since 2021. What's this about? Before Thompson could respond, a voice cut through the air like a knife. He's lying. Karen Mitchell stood on her front porch, arms folded, her face a mix of indignation and certainty. He's always out here, messing with his phone, looking around like he's up to no good. Today, he's been standing there for 10 minutes, just tapping away. Marcus turned, his jaw tightening. Karen. Of course. She was the neighborhood's unofficial watchdog, always peering out her window, always ready to assume the worst. He'd ignored her for years, but now she'd gone too far. I was on my router settings, he said flatly, meeting her gaze, because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi. That's it. Karen scoffed, undeterred. Oh, sure, that's what you say. I'm supposed to believe that? Thompson exchanged a glance with Patel, her expression unreadable. Ma'am, she said, turning to Karen, do you have any evidence that Mr. Reed has done something illegal? Karen faltered, her confidence wavering. Well, no, not exactly, she admitted. But it's suspicious. He's always so secretive, and now he's out here doing whatever this is. You should check. Thompson's patience seemed to thin, but she kept her tone professional. Mr. Reed, would you mind showing us your router settings just to clear this up? Marcus clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything. This was his house, his network, his life. But he also knew how these situations could spiral, especially when someone like Karen was stirring the pot. Fine, he muttered, pulling out his phone. Here, take a look. He opened the router app and handed the phone to Thompson. She leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen. Patel stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. The list of connected devices appeared, and there it was, Boise Net X12, still active despite the password change. Thompson's brow furrowed. Who owns this device? She asked, her voice sharper now. Not me, Marcus said, shaking his head. That's what I was trying to fix. Patel's eyebrows shot up. So someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission? Marcus nodded, his frustration giving way to unease. Yeah, and I don't think they're just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs. He tapped the screen, pulling up the activity data. It's been running non-stop, pulling way more data than it should. Thompson's posture shifted, her casual demeanor replaced by something more alert. What? Do you mean more than it should? Marcus hesitated, his fingers hovering over the screen. He wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer himself, but the logs didn't lie. I mean, someone's been watching. Karen, still on her porch, froze. Watching? Her voice was smaller now, less certain. What do you mean, watching? Marcus's eyes met hers, cold and steady. I mean, someone's been spying, and they might be watching all of us. The air grew heavy, the weight of his words settling over the group. Karen's face paled, her hands gripping the porch railing. Thompson's expression hardened, and Patel's hand twitched toward his radio. This wasn't just a neighbor dispute anymore. Something darker was at play, and Marcus had a sinking feeling that he'd just scratched the surface. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. Marcus Reed stood in his driveway, his phone still in Detective Sarah. Thompson's hands, the router app, opened to the incriminating logs. Across the street, Karen Mitchell's face had drained of color, her earlier bravado replaced by a flicker of fear. Officer James Patel's hand hovered near his radio, his eyes darting between Marcus and Thompson. The quiet Boise neighborhood of Cloverdale Estates felt anything but quiet now, the hum of distant lawnmowers drowned out by the weight of Marcus's revelation. Someone was spying, and it wasn't just on him. Watching? Karen repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped off her porch, her sandals slapping against the pavement as she crossed the street. What do you mean spying? On who? Marcus didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on the phone screen where the activity logs for Boise Net X12 glowed like a warning sign. The data usage was staggering. Gigabytes of traffic, far more than a casual Wi-Fi thief would need. He wasn't a hacker, but he'd taken enough network security courses in college to know this wasn't just someone streaming movies. This was deliberate, invasive, and deeply wrong. "Mr. Reed," Thompson said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Let's take this inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with." Marcus nodded, though his stomach churned. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet here he was, at the center of a police investigation in his own driveway. He glanced at Karen, who looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Fine," he said, leading the way toward his front door. "But I'm telling you, this isn't about me." Thompson and Patel followed, their boots heavy on the wooden porch. Karen hesitated, then trailed behind, her arms crossed tightly as if to shield herself from whatever was coming. Marcus pushed open the door, the cool air of his living room a stark contrast to the summer heat outside. The space was sparse but neat. A leather couch, a coffee table with a single coding textbook, and a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. His laptop sat open on the dining table, still logged into the router admin panel. "Set it up here, Thompson," said, gesturing to the table. Her tone was all business, her sharp eyes scanning the room as if looking for something out of place. Marcus placed his phone on the table and mirrored the router settings onto his laptop screen. The list of connected devices reappeared, BoysNet X12 glaring at him like an unwelcome guest. Patel leaned in, his tech-savvy instincts kicking in. "Can you tell what kind of device this is?" he asked. Marcus clicked through the settings, his fingers moving with practiced ease. "Not exactly," he said. "The router doesn't give me model details, just the IP and activity logs." He opened the logs, scrolling through lines of timestamps and data transfers. Then he froze, his breath catching in his throat. Thompson noticed the shift in his posture. "What is it?" Marcus's voice was low, almost a murmur. "It's been accessing camera feeds." The room went silent. Karen, standing near the doorway, blinked rapidly. "Camera feeds?" she said, her voice trembling. "What camera feeds?" Marcus turned the laptop toward her, his expression grim. "Mine. My home security cameras." He clicked a link in the logs, and a window popped up, a grainy feed from the camera above his front door, showing the driveway where they'd just been standing. "Someone's been logging in and watching my live feeds." Patel's eyes widened. "You're saying someone's been spying on you through your own security system?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Marcus said, his voice tight. But as he scrolled further, his stomach dropped. The logs didn't stop at his cameras. There were other IP addresses, other connections, flagged by his system as part of the same network. "This is bad," he murmured, his fingers hovering. Over the keyboard, Thompson leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Marcus tapped the screen, highlighting a new set of logs. "Whoever this is, they're not just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood." Karen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, that can't be right." Marcus ignored her, clicking another log. A new feed opened, a dimly lit hallway, then a living room with a floral couch, then a bedroom with a cluttered desk. Karen's breath hitched, her eyes wide with recognition. "Wait," she whispered. That's my house." The feed showed her living room, the same iced tea glass still sitting on the counter where she'd left it. Marcus didn't need to ask if she was sure. Her face said it all. He recognized the layout too, having glimpsed it during a rare neighborly exchange years ago. The room felt too close, too exposed, like a violation laid bare on the screen. Thompson's expression darkened. "How the hell is this happening?" Marcus gritted his teeth, his mind racing. "If I had to guess, someone set up a fake network, a Wi-Fi signal that looks legit. People connect to it without realizing, and once they do, their devices get compromised. It's called a man-in-the-middle attack." Patel nodded, his tech knowledge aligning with Marcus's explanation. "So their router acts like a middleman, intercepting everything, passwords, camera feeds, you name it." Karen's voice shook as she took a step back. "You're saying someone's been watching me? My family?" Marcus met her gaze, his eyes cold but not unkind. That's exactly what I'm saying. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in with the weight of the truth. Karen sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "Oh my God," she whispered, her earlier accusations against Marcus forgotten. Thompson's jaw tightened. "We need to figure out who's behind this, and fast." She pulled out her radio, her voice sharp as she called for backup. "This is Detective Thompson, Aspen Drive. We've got a potential cybercrime situation. Unauthorized network access, possible surveillance. Send cyber unit support." Patel's eyes stayed on the laptop. "Can you trace where the data's going?" Marcus was already on it, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He wasn't a cybersecurity expert, but he knew enough to follow the trail. He opened the IP logs, cross-referencing the connections. His heart sank as the results loaded. "This can't be right," he said, turning the screen toward Thompson. "What?" she asked, leaning in. "The data isn't going to some remote server," Marcus said, his voice low. "It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood." Karen's head snapped up. "You mean someone close by is doing this?" Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "It's coming from a house just a few doors down." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Can you pinpoint which one?" Marcus worked fast, cross-referencing connection timestamps with signal strength. His router had logged enough data to narrow it down. Within minutes he had a match. His stomach dropped as he recognized the address. Karen did too, her face paling further. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. That's my house." Marcus's voice was cold, cutting through her denial. "It's Ethan's setup." Ethan Carter, Karen's 17-year-old cousin, had been living with her for the past 6 months. He was a high school senior, quiet and withdrawn, always glued to his computer or phone. Marcus had seen him around, hoodie up, earbuds in, barely acknowledging the world. Karen had mentioned he was good with tech, helping her set up her smart TV and troubleshoot her printer. But now those skills took on a sinister edge. Karen's eyes darted to Marcus, then to Thompson. "No, that doesn't make sense." "Ethan wouldn't. He's just a kid." Thompson's voice was firm, but not unkind. "We need to talk to him, now." Karen hesitated, her hands wringing together. Okay, but this has to be a mistake." She stood, her movements unsteady, as if the ground had shifted beneath her. Marcus pushed his chair back, his frustration simmering. "I'm coming." "Too." Thompson gave him a sharp look. "No, you stay here. Let us handle this." Marcus clenched his fists, hating the idea of sitting back when he'd uncovered the truth. But he knew arguing with a detective wouldn't help. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth, "but you better get answers." Thompson nodded, then turned to Karen. "Lead the way." Karen's steps were heavy as she led Thompson and Patel out of Marcus's house and down the street. The summer air felt stifling now, the neighborhood's cheery exterior mocking her. Every step toward her home felt like a betrayal. Ethan, the boy she'd taken in, the one she'd fed, supported, even defended when neighbors called him strange. It couldn't be him. And yet, a voice in her head whispered, "What if it is?" She unlocked her front door, her hands shaking. "Ethan," she called, her voice cracking. "Can you come downstairs?" No answer. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Thompson exchanged a glance with Patel, then stepped inside, her hand resting near her holster. "We're going up," she said. Karen didn't argue. She wrapped her arms around herself, her breath uneven, and followed them up the stairs. Ethan's bedroom door was closed, a faint glow seeping from the gap beneath it. Thompson knocked hard, the sound echoing in the silent house. "Ethan Carter, this is the police. We need to talk." Silence. Then a shuffle, a chair scraping, footsteps. Patel's hand hovered over his gun. Open the door, Ethan. Now. The knob turned slowly, the door creaking open to reveal Ethan Carter. He was lanky, with messy brown hair and a hoodie that seemed too big for his frame. His eyes darted between Thompson, Patel and Karen, wide with something between fear and defiance. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. Thompson studied him, her gaze piercing. "We have reason to believe you've been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood. Care to explain?" Ethan's face barely flinched, but his fingers curled slightly, gripping the edge of his hoodie. "What? That's crazy," he said, forcing a laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about." Patel stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mind if we check your laptop?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You don't have a warrant." Thompson's patience was thinning. "Ethan, we can get one. But right now, we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth. Why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes?" Ethan froze, his eyes flicking to Karen. She stood in the hallway, her face a mix of disbelief and dread. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking, "please tell me you're not involved in this." For a moment, he said nothing. Then his shoulders slumped and the mask cracked. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "It started as a joke. I wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi, just to mess with them." Thompson's voice was sharp. "So you admit you hacked into the network?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. Karen's breath caught, her hand covering her mouth. "It was just supposed to be a prank," Ethan continued, his voice faster now, as if trying to outrun the consequences. "But then I saw the security cameras, and I got curious." Patel's eyes narrowed. "Curious or obsessed?" Ethan didn't answer, his silence damning. Thompson's patience ran out. "How many people have you watched?" Ethan's voice was barely audible. "I don't know." Karen staggered back, her voice a whisper. "Oh my God!" Thompson's jaw clenched. "Ethan Carter, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance." Ethan's face went pale. "Wait, no, Patel," was already pulling out his cuffs, the metal glinting in the dim light. Karen turned away, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus had been right, and the worst part was, she'd called the cops on him when the real danger had been in her own home, all along. The air in Karen Mitchell's hallway felt thick, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ethan Carter stood frozen, his wrists now bound in handcuffs, the metallic click still echoing in the quiet house. Detective Sarah Thompson's voice was steady as she read him his rights, each word landing like a hammer. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Officer James Patel stood by her side, his expression a mix of professionalism and disbelief, his hand resting lightly on Ethan's arm to guide him toward the door. Karen stood a few steps away, her hands pressed against her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her nephew, the boy she'd taken in, fed, defended, was being arrested for spying on their neighbors, for violating the privacy of the very community she prided herself on protecting. The irony was suffocating. She'd called the police on Marcus Reed, certain he was the threat, when the real danger had been sleeping under her roof all along. Marcus, standing on the sidewalk outside Karen's house, watched the scene unfold through the open front door. He hadn't been allowed to come inside, Thompson's orders, but he'd followed as far as the property line, his frustration and curiosity pulling him forward. From where he stood, he could see Ethan's pale face, the way his shoulders slumped. As Patel led him toward the patrol car, Marcus's jaw tightened, a mix of vindication and anger simmering in his chest. He'd been minding his own business, changing his Wi-Fi password to protect his network, and somehow ended up with cops in his driveway. All because of Karen's paranoia and Ethan's reckless prank. Thompson stepped out onto the porch, her sharp eyes scanning the street before settling on Marcus. "You were right," she said, her voice low but clear. "If you hadn't caught that device on your network, we might never have found this." Marcus let out a slow breath, his arms crossed tightly. "Yeah, well, I wasn't trying to play hero. I just wanted my internet to stop lagging." Thompson's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile she'd shown all day. "You did more than that. This could have gone on a lot longer. Gotten a lot worse." Marcus didn't respond immediately. His gaze flicked to Karen, who was now leaning against the doorframe, her face a mask of shock and guilt. He could see the weight of her mistake settling in, the realization that her snap judgment had turned an innocent neighbor into a suspect, while her own nephew betrayed her trust. Part of him wanted to feel sorry for her, but the sting of her accusations was still fresh. Karen's voice broke the silence, small and unsteady. "Marcus, I was wrong." She stepped forward, her hands wringing together. "I made an assumption and it was completely unfair. I'm so sorry." Marcus met her eyes, his expression unreadable. The apology hung in the air, sincere but inadequate. He'd spent years keeping to himself, avoiding the neighborhood's gossip and drama, only to be dragged into this because of her gut feeling. He could still hear her voice from earlier, sharp and accusing. "He's lying. He's always out here messing with his phone, looking around like he's up to no good." "You know what's crazy?" Marcus said finally, his voice calm but laced with an edge. "I was out here minding my own business, changing my own Wi-Fi password, and somehow I'm the one who got the cops called on me." Karen flinched, her cheeks flushing with shame. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. There was no defense, no excuse that could undo what she'd set in motion. Marcus shook his head, the weight of the moment settling over him. "I don't need an apology," he said, turning toward his house. "Just do better." With that, he walked away, his footsteps steady on the pavement, leaving Karen standing alone in the middle of the street. Thompson watched him go, then turned to Patel, who was securing Ethan in the back of the patrol car. "Let's get him to the station," she said, "cyber units on their way to seize his devices. We need to know how deep this goes." Patel nodded, closing the car door with a thud. Ethan sat in the back seat, his head bowed, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The weight of his actions was sinking in. The prank that had spiraled into a felony, now a reality he couldn't escape. Karen stayed rooted to the spot, her arms wrapped around herself as the patrol car pulled away. The neighbors were starting to notice now, curtains twitching, a few faces peeking out from porches. Cloverdale Estates, with its pristine lawns and friendly waves, was about to be rocked by a scandal no one saw coming. And Karen, the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood, would be at the center of it, not as a hero, but as the aunt of the culprit. Inside the police station, Ethan sat in a small interview room, his hands clasped tightly on the table. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on his pale face. Across from him, Thompson and Patel sat with notepads and a recorder, their expressions unyielding. A cybercrime specialist, Officer Lena Chen, had joined them, her laptop open to analyze the data from Ethan's devices, which had been seized from Karen's house. "Start talking, Ethan," Thompson said, her voice firm, "and don't leave anything out. How did this start, and how far did it go?" Ethan swallowed hard, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his hoodie. "It was just a dumb experiment," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm taking AP Computer Science, and we were learning about network security. I wanted to see if I could do it, set up a fake Wi-Fi network just to mess with people." Patel raised an eyebrow. "Mess with people how?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the table. "You know, like make their internet slow or redirect their browser to a funny site. Just stupid stuff." "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Thompson leaned forward, her gaze piercing. But you didn't stop there, did you? You accessed security cameras. You watched people in their homes. Ethan's face flushed, a mix of shame and defensiveness. It wasn't like that. I mean, yeah, I saw the cameras, but I didn't mean to spy. I just got curious. I wanted to see how far I could push it. Jen, who had been quietly typing, looked up from her laptop. You pushed it pretty far, Ethan. We found logs on your computer showing access to at least 7 different home security systems in the neighborhood. That's not curiosity. That's a crime. Ethan's shoulders slumped further, his voice breaking. I know, I messed up. I didn't think anyone would find out. Thompson's jaw tightened. You didn't think anyone would find out you were watching people in their living rooms, their bedrooms? You realize how serious this is? Ethan nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I swear I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I got carried away. Patel's voice was softer, but no less firm. Who else was involved? Was anyone helping you? Ethan shook his head vigorously. No one. It was just me, I swear. Chen tapped her screen, pulling up a network map. He's telling the truth about that, at least. The setup was amateur, sloppy even. A single rogue access point broadcasting. A fake SSID. He didn't cover his tracks well, which is how Mr. Reed caught it. Thompson nodded, her mind already shifting to the next steps. We'll need to notify every household affected, check their systems for breaches and make sure this doesn't happen again. Ethan, you're looking at charges of unauthorized computer access and unlawful surveillance. You're 17, so you'll likely be processed as a juvenile, but this is serious. You understand that? Ethan nodded, his voice barely audible. Yeah. Back in Cloverdale Estates, Karen sat on her couch, staring at the now empty glass of iced tea on the coffee table. The house felt too quiet, too empty without Ethan's presence. She'd spent the last hour replaying every moment of the past 6 months, every time Ethan had been on his computer, every time he'd brushed off her questions about what he was working on. She'd thought he was just a typical teenager, obsessed with games or coding projects. How had she missed this? Her phone buzzed with a text from a neighbor. Is it true? Ethan got arrested. Karen didn't respond. She couldn't face the questions, the judgment, the inevitable whispers that would spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. She'd been so quick to point fingers at Marcus, so sure she was protecting Cloverdale, when the real threat had been right here, in her own home. She stood, pacing the living room, her eyes landing on the security camera mounted in the corner. The tiny red light blinked, a reminder of how exposed she'd been, how exposed they'd all been. She grabbed her phone and opened the camera app, half expecting to see someone watching her. The feed was clear, but the unease lingered, a knot in her stomach that wouldn't loosen. Across the street, Marcus sat at his dining table, his laptop still open to the router settings. He'd changed his password again, added 2-factor authentication to his security system, and disconnected every device he didn't recognize. But the violation lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. Someone had been watching him, watching his home, his life, and he hadn't even known it. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Part of him wanted to confront Karen again, to make her feel the weight of her mistake. But what good would that do? She was already unraveling, her perfect neighborhood facade shattered. He'd seen the look in her eyes as Ethan was led away. Guilt, shame, regret. It wasn't his job to make her feel worse. His phone buzzed with an email from his internet provider, a generic message about scheduled maintenance. He snorted, tossing the phone onto the table. Maintenance wasn't the problem. Trust was. He'd always valued his privacy, but now it felt fragile, like a glass wall that could shatter at any moment. The next morning, Cloverdale Estates was abuzz with activity. Police cars returned, this time with cybercrime specialists who went door to door, checking routers and security systems for breaches. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering about Ethan, about Karen, about the cameras. Some were angry, others scared, but all felt the sting of betrayal. The neighborhood that prided itself on safety and community had been exposed, its secrets laid bare by a teenager's reckless curiosity. Karen stayed inside, her curtains drawn, avoiding the stares and questions. She'd called her sister, Ethan's mother, the night before, a conversation filled with tears and apologies. Ethan's parents were driving up from Twin Falls to deal with the legal fallout, but Karen knew the damage was done. She'd lost more than her nephew's trust. She'd lost her place in the neighborhood, her self-appointed role as its protector. Marcus, meanwhile, went back to work, his laptop humming as he tackled another coding project. But his focus kept drifting to the events of the previous day. He'd been cleared, vindicated, but the experience left a mark. He wondered how many other neighbors had judged him silently over the years, how many had seen his quiet nature as a reason to suspect him. It wasn't just Karen's mistake. It was the ease with which she'd turned on him, the speed with which a community could point fingers at the wrong person. By noon, Thompson stopped by Marcus's house with an update. "Ethan's being processed," she said, standing on his porch. "He's cooperating, which helps. We've identified 8 affected households so far, including yours and Ms. Mitchell's. The cyber unit's cleaning up the mess, securing the networks." Marcus nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "What's going to happen to him?" "Juvenile court, most likely," Thompson said. "He's young, no prior record, so he might get probation, community service. But the judge will want to make an example of this. Privacy violations are no joke." Marcus exhaled, his gaze drifting to Karen's house. "And her?" Thompson followed his gaze. "She's not in legal trouble, but she's got enough to deal with. Guilt's a heavy thing." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. Thompson gave him a nod, then headed back to her cruiser, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus stepped outside to water his lawn. The neighborhood was quieter now, the police cars gone, the neighbors retreating to their homes. Across the street, Karen's house was dark, the curtains still drawn. He wondered if she'd ever look at him the same way, if she'd ever wave or nod like nothing had happened. He doubted it. As he turned off the hose, his phone pinged with a notification from his security system. A motion alert from his front. Dr. Camera. He opened the app, half expecting another glitch, but the feed was clear. Just a stray cat darting across his porch. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, a small reminder that not every shadow was a threat. But the lesson lingered, etched into the quiet streets of Cloverdale Estates. Assumptions had consequences. Jumping to conclusions based on bias or paranoia could ruin innocent lives, while the real danger went unchecked. Karen had learned that the hard way, and Marcus had paid the price for her mistake. As he headed back, inside, he made a silent promise to himself. He'd keep his walls up, his privacy guarded, but he'd also keep his eyes open. The truth, as he'd learned, was rarely what it seemed, and in a neighborhood like this, that was a lesson worth remembering.